My name is Lyriel Cade, and I never thought my quiet life in Chicago would change so suddenly. I thought my life was simple. I worked, I rested when I could, and I tried to do the right thing every day. But everything changed because of one message on my phone. It happened right after a very long day at work. I had worked 2 shifts at the hospital. That means I worked all day and all night. My legs felt heavy. They were tired and sore. My feet hurt inside my shoes. My work clothes, called scrubs, were still warm from the bright hospital lights when I sat down and checked my phone. That was when my credit card app lit up. At first, I thought it was nothing. Maybe a small charge. Maybe groceries or gas. But when I looked at the screen, my heart started beating fast. The number was too big. I blinked and looked again because I thought it had to be wrong. It was not wrong. The screen showed a charge for $15,000. $15,000. That is a lot of money. That is more money than I spent in many months. I felt cold all over even though the room was warm. The charge was for a luxury cruise. A very fancy trip on a big ship in the ocean. I did not book it. I did not want it. I did not even know about it. I felt confused. I felt scared. I felt sick to my stomach. When I followed the charge and found out who made it, my heart sank even more. It was my own family. Someone in my family used my card. At that moment, something inside me stopped. It was like a door closed quietly in my mind. For many years, I had let small things go. I paid for problems that were called emergencies, but were never really my emergencies. I helped when I was told to help. I gave money when someone said they needed it. I took on responsibilities before I was old enough to understand how heavy they were. I did not fight it. I did not argue. I thought this was just what families do. But this was different. This did not help. This was not confusion. This was not a mistake. This felt like a message. A very clear message. It said, your life is not as important as ours. When I asked him about the charge, I hoped he would look sorry. I hoped he would explain. I hoped he would say it was an accident. Instead, he laughed. He did not laugh because he was nervous. He did not laugh because he was embarrassed. He laughed like it was funny, like it did not matter at all, like $15,000 was nothing, like I was nothing. Then he said something that hurt more than the money. It's not like you ever travel anyway. That was the moment something inside me went very still. I did not yell. I did not cry. I did not argue. I just looked at him and said 4 quiet words. Enjoy your trip. Those words ended the version of me they thought would always stay. The version that always helped. The version that never said no. While they were planning and packing and thinking about fun days on a big ship, I was already thinking about what I needed to do next. And they did not see it coming. Before I tell you what he said next, and what happened after I walked away, let me ask you something. What time is it where you are right now? And where are you watching from? I wonder how far this story will travel. The hours after that felt strange. Time moved, but it felt different. My mind felt clear, like fog had lifted. I did not feel confused anymore. I felt calm, but it was a serious calm. I could not explain why everything looked sharper. The lights seemed brighter. Sounds felt clearer. I knew something inside me had changed. And once it changed, I knew I could not change it back. Growing up in Chicago taught me many things. One thing it taught me was that some families have rules that are never spoken out loud. My family had many of those rules. My father believed that being in charge meant never being questioned. If he said something, that was the end of it. My mother was softer. She spoke kindly and smiled often. But her kindness often meant saying yes when she should have said no. Between them, I learned how to be careful. I learned to notice what people needed before they asked. I learned to help without being thanked. I learned to carry problems quietly. I did not have a word for it when I was young. I just thought being responsible was something you were born with, like your name or your hair color. When I was old enough to work, I started right away. I got part-time jobs after school. Those turned into full-time work very quickly. I saved money, but the money never stayed with me. There was always something. A bill that needed paying. A fee someone forgot about. A cost no one planned for. Somehow, it always became my job to fix it. If Azure wanted new clothes, I paid. If Azure needed a ride, I rearranged my work hours. If my father lost his wallet again, I reached for my own money. No one had to ask. I did it automatically. I did not think it was strange. That was my normal. When I went to college, I thought things would change. I studied healthcare. I went to classes. I worked long nights moving patients in cleaning rooms. I believed that once I had my degree, life would feel lighter. But it did not. Phone calls followed me everywhere. Bills followed me. Problems followed me. Insurance payments were late. Cars needed fixing. School costs for Azura were suddenly my responsibility. I handled it all quietly because I believed staying quiet kept the peace. People called me dependable. They said it like it was a compliment. I believed them. I did not see that being dependable meant I was being used. After college, I got a job at a hospital on the west side of Chicago. I worked hard. I saved money little by little. I lived carefully. When I finally bought a small house, it felt like a dream. Signing the papers felt big and important. That house was mine. I imagined calm weekends. I imagined leaving dishes in the sink if I wanted. I imagined silence that did not ask anything from me. The house was supposed to mean freedom, but that feeling did not last long. My parents' rental home fell apart quickly. They did not ask to move in with me. They told me it was the only option. They spoke like it was already decided. I said yes. I told myself it was only for a short time. But a short time turned into a long time. Weeks became months. The space that was mine slowly disappeared. Azura moved into the guest room like it was hers forever. My mother changed furniture and decorations like she owned the place. Soon, the house felt familiar in a bad way. It felt like the home I thought I had escaped. I worked longer hours. I slept less. My father treated my money like family money. My mother made excuses for everything. Azura lived without worries. I stayed quiet because speaking up felt scary. Looking back now, I see all the signs. I lost my space. I lost my privacy. I lost parts of myself. This was not new. It had been happening my whole life. Once I saw it clearly, I could not pretend anymore. The next morning, the truth felt heavy. My life was full of duties that were never meant to be mine. My name was on the house papers, but I barely lived there. I slept in a small rented studio near the hospital because I worked strange hours. My own house ran without me. I had built stability, but I stood outside of it. At work, my coworker Lyra noticed how tired I looked. She always noticed things. I did not tell her everything. I only shared small pieces. She listened quietly. Her face changed. She looked shocked. Seeing her reaction helped me understand something important. This was not normal. That thought stayed with me all day. It followed me through the halls. It followed me while I worked. I kept asking myself one question again and again. What part of this life is really mine? After my shift, I knew I needed real answers. Not feelings. Not guilt. Facts. I talked to a legal service about housing and property. I expected it to be hard. I expected problems. But it was simple. The house was mine. Only mine. No lease. No agreement. No shared ownership. I did not have to keep anyone there. That truth made me sad at first. Not because I was trapped, but because I never had been. I had stayed because I thought I had to. That sadness made space for something else. A decision. I began looking at how to sell the house. I studied timelines. I compared choices. I moved slowly and carefully. I was not acting in anger. I was acting with clarity. Every step I took came from one clear thought in my mind. If things stayed the same, I would keep getting hurt. Little by little, day after day, I felt myself becoming smaller inside. For a long time, I believed that staying quiet and putting up with pain meant I was strong. I thought being strong meant never leaving, never complaining, and never saying no. But I finally learned something important. Real strength was not staying. Real strength was knowing when to walk away. Leaving something that hurts you is not easy. It takes courage. It takes honesty with yourself. And it takes accepting that you deserve better, even if others don't agree. The house needed to be looked at before it could be put up for sale. That was the first real step. So I searched for a local real estate agent. I read reviews carefully. I looked for words like professional, honest, and efficient. I wanted someone who would focus on the job and not on my personal story. That's when I found Varel Soren. When Varel replied to my message, her tone was calm and respectful. She did not sound curious in a personal way. She did not ask why I was selling or who lived with me. She simply asked about the house and suggested a time to see it. I didn't realize how much I needed that calm, steady voice until I heard it. It made me feel safe. We scheduled a walkthrough for later in the week. By chance, my family would be away for several days. They were taking a trip together. That gave me time alone in the house. It felt like the timing was meant to be, even though I didn't believe in fate before. Instead of feeling nervous, I felt firm and ready. I wasn't trying to punish anyone. I wasn't planning revenge. I wasn't angry anymore. I was simply trying to take back something that had been slowly taken from me. Year after year, my time, my money, my space, and my voice had disappeared. The loss happened so quietly that I almost didn't see it. But now I saw it clearly. And this time I was ready to act. By the time the day of the walkthrough arrived, I felt calm. The decision had already been made in my heart. I didn't need to explain it to myself anymore. I met Varel outside the house. She stood tall, holding a clipboard under her arm. Her posture was relaxed but confident. She smiled politely and introduced herself. Her voice was warm but professional. To her, this was just another house, another appointment. That actually helped me. For me, the house was full of memories and pain. For her, it was simply work. When I unlocked the front door, the sound of the lock clicking felt loud in the quiet air. I stepped inside, and something inside me shifted. Even though my name was on the papers, I felt like a guest in my own home. Varel walked ahead, doing her job carefully. She looked at the walls, the floors, and the ceiling. She checked the layout of the rooms. She wrote notes about things buyers would care about. I didn't guide her. I didn't point things out. I knew the house would tell its story on its own, even if she didn't fully understand it. In the living room, framed photos covered the walls. They showed family moments, birthdays, holidays, and smiles. But none of the pictures included me. They were arranged neatly and evenly, like someone had planned it carefully. What hurt wasn't just that I was missing. It was knowing that my absence was intentional. I had paid for this house. I had worked for it. Yet my presence had been erased. It was like I never existed there. Varel talked about how nice the light was and how the furniture could be arranged better for buyers. She didn't know how heavy my chest felt. I didn't interrupt her. Her focus on simple details helped keep me steady. We walked down the hallway together. She opened the first bedroom door. When I looked inside, I felt confused. The room didn't feel like it had ever belonged to me. My sister had turned it into her dressing room. Clothes hung neatly on racks, sorted by color. Shoes were lined up carefully along the wall. A makeup table was covered with brushes, powders, and bottles. Everything looked organized and permanent. There was no sign that I had once lived there. No memory of me at all. Standing in that doorway, I finally understood how much space I had lost. Not just space in the house, but space in my own life. Varel paused and wrote a few notes. Her face stayed neutral. To her, it was just a crowded room that needed cleaning. To me, it showed years of being pushed aside. Next, we went into the main bedroom. My parents' belongings filled the room completely. Their clothes were in every drawer. Their items covered the surfaces. The closets were packed full. Nothing about the room felt temporary. It felt settled, like they planned to stay forever. There was no sign of gratitude or awareness that this was not originally their space. They lived there like it had always been theirs, and I was the one just passing through. Varel continued the walkthrough and talked about other homes in the Chicago area. She mentioned prices, how long houses stayed on the market, and what buyers were looking for. Her voice stayed calm and clear. It helped ground me. The world she described felt far away from my emotions. Contracts, inspections, timelines. It all sounded simple and manageable. The kitchen was the last room. This room carried the weight of every bill I had paid without thanks. I had chosen the appliances, but other people used them. The pantry was filled with food I never ate. The refrigerator held groceries I didn't buy for myself. I had paid for a life that wasn't mine. When Varel closed her folder, she looked at me kindly. She said the market was strong and the house would likely sell quickly. She said we could begin as soon as I was ready. I didn't hesitate. I had already made the choice long ago. Standing there in the kitchen, surrounded by proof of everything I had given, I told her to list the house. The listing went live faster than I expected. Almost immediately, messages and calls came in. Varel handled everything smoothly. She kept me updated but didn't overwhelm me with details. I trusted her. Her calm made everything feel easier. The whole process felt strange, like I was watching someone else's life from far away. Within a day, many showings were scheduled. Varel guided buyers through the rooms that once held my hopes for the future. I stayed away during the showings, not because I was scared, but because I knew my presence would only make things harder. The house was no longer personal. It wasn't mine emotionally anymore, but it wasn't someone else's yet. It was in between, just like me. Varel later told me that interest was strong. Many buyers were serious. I listened quietly, feeling both relief and disbelief. For years, the house had stood for responsibility and duty. Now it stood for freedom. One couple stood out among the buyers. Their names were Theron and Ilora Dane. Varel said they were prepared, organized, and already approved for a loan. They wanted a home in my neighborhood because it fit their lives and work. Hearing that made me feel calm. The idea that the house would belong to people who wanted it, not needed it, felt right. As the showings continued, I returned to my hospital shifts. I noticed a change in myself. I felt clearer. The tight feeling inside me was easing. I was still tired, but the tiredness felt clean. It was no longer mixed with anger. During one shift, I finished a dispute with my credit card company. I reported a charge that wasn't mine and sent all the papers they asked for. Later that day, the money was returned to my account. It didn't fix everything, but it felt like a small victory. On social media, I saw photos from the cruise. Azura had posted pictures of fancy food, bright lights, and smiling faces. I scrolled without feeling much. The photos felt empty, like ads. I wasn't angry anymore. I just understood that I had paid for a life they enjoyed. By the end of the week, Varel called with news. Theron and Illyra had made an offer. It was strong and simple. No delays. No problems. She explained everything clearly. The offer felt like proof that my plan was working. I reviewed the papers carefully and met Varel to sign them. The documents lay quietly on her desk. There were no arguments. No shouting. Just ink and paper marking a change. I signed each page slowly. I felt sure. This was the right step. When I finished, Varel smiled and nodded. The next steps were clear and calm. Inspections. Paperwork. Normal things. The house was officially under contract. The day they returned arrived quietly. I got a short message on my phone saying the keys had been transferred. I was standing in the hospital break room, my badge hanging crooked. I didn't feel nervous. I didn't feel excited. I felt peaceful. Somewhere across the city, they were riding home from the airport. I didn't check the time. I only imagined their suitcases rolling toward the house they believed was theirs. They were returning to a place they had claimed as home, never knowing what it had cost me to keep it standing. Later, Brooke sent a short message to say that the people who moved into the house were settling in nicely. They were polite, thankful, and excited about their new home. Her message didn't carry any big feelings or drama, just a practical, everything is done. For the people who moved in, this was the beginning of a steady, happy time in their lives. For me, it meant a door I had kept open for too long was finally closed. I wasn't there to see what happened next, but I could imagine it very clearly. They would walk up to the front door, expecting it to open with the key they had always used. But it wouldn't. The lock would stay firm and strong, refusing to turn. At first, they would be confused. They might try again. Then they would start feeling annoyed, maybe even frustrated. Finally, they would realize that something had changed while they were away. Maybe they would look at each other, searching for an explanation. Then they would notice that the lights inside the house were different, and the shadows moved in a way that was not familiar. Theron would probably come to answer the door. He had always been calm, the kind of person who could stop problems from getting worse. I imagined him greeting them carefully, politely, but with a quiet caution. Illyra would stand nearby, gentle and kind, helping the situation feel softer and less tense. They would explain everything simply. They had bought the house. All the papers were signed. The house now belonged to someone else. My family would probably feel shocked, and even a little hurt. The house they thought would always be theirs had changed hands without them knowing. Victor might stare sharply, my mother might gasp, and Azura might fidget nervously as they realized the truth. There would be questions, maybe even angry words. But none of that would change the facts. The house had been sold, and there was no going back. While they stood on the porch, trying to make sense of what had just happened, my phone began to buzz. At first, there were just a few calls. Then the number of calls increased, quickly turning into dozens. The notifications came all at once, overlapping, blurring together in one loud mess. I didn't answer the phone. I just sat on the edge of my bed in my small apartment, letting it buzz against the blanket. The sound was soft but persistent, a constant reminder of the past trying to reach me. Their urgency didn't bother me. I quietly understood that this outcome had been coming for a long time. Finally, the buzzing stopped. There was silence. It felt like the air itself was holding its breath. Then the phone rang again. Call after call, fast and unrelenting, like waves crashing over each other. I turned the phone face down. I didn't need to hear it anymore. The noise no longer had power over me. When the final call ended, I picked up the phone. The screen glowed softly in the dim room. It showed 99 missed calls. That number said everything I needed to know. After that, the hours passed quietly. The quiet felt unfamiliar, like stepping into a space that finally belonged to me. I didn't feel triumphant or angry. I felt steady. I felt calm. A chapter of my life had ended in a way no one could undo, and that fact brought a strange kind of peace. The world outside moved at its normal pace, but inside me, my own sense of direction started to shift. I began to think about who I was and what I wanted, without anyone else's expectations hanging over me. Without the house, my family had nowhere safe to go. My father didn't have a steady income, so landlords didn't trust him enough to rent to him. My mother worked part-time, but her money wasn't enough to pay security deposits or other fees. Azura had never lived on her own. She had no savings, no plan, and no sense of urgency until necessity forced it upon her. They ended up in a motel at the edge of the city. It was a small, temporary place that people only go to when they have no other options. I didn't find out by seeing them. I learned it when a piece of mail came with their new address. My mother called one last time before I blocked her number. Her voice was soft, the same voice I had grown up thinking was comforting, but threaded with disappointment. She didn't ask why I did what I did. She didn't acknowledge all the years of imbalance, all the times I had silently carried the weight of our family. She only asked how I could do something so shocking and unthinkable. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I calmly ended the call and added her number to the list I would no longer answer. My father never left a message, but I saw his blocked calls appear quickly on my phone before disappearing again. Silence was the only response I could give. It matched the person I was becoming. With distance came clarity. I found a new apartment in another neighborhood. It was small but bright, with just enough space for a life that didn't require me to justify myself to anyone. I furnished it slowly. I didn't just choose things because they were useful. I chose things because they made me feel happy and safe. I had never allowed myself that kind of thought before. Each choice I made was a quiet declaration. This space was mine. It belonged entirely to me. My routines changed too. I took morning walks before work. I stopped lingering at the hospital after my shifts. I allowed myself to rest without feeling guilty. Nothing outside looked very different, but inside, everything rearranged itself. The absence of constant expectations gave me room for possibilities I hadn't imagined. Freedom didn't come as a sudden explosion or a dramatic change. It came slowly in small moments when I realized I no longer owed my life to anyone else's comfort. News about my family came indirectly. They had a hard time finding a permanent home. My father became more frustrated as adult responsibilities caught up to him. Azura tried temporary jobs but quit after a few weeks. My mother tried to hold everyone together, but without anyone else helping, her efforts had little effect. Their struggles weren't punishments. They were consequences. Lives built on dependency, without a strong foundation, can't stay stable. For the first time, they were forced to stand on their own, without relying on the parts of life I had been holding up for them. Walking away didn't erase the past, but it allowed me to reclaim the parts of myself I had given up while trying to keep peace. I learned that love doesn't mean losing yourself. Loyalty without fairness isn't true loyalty. Boundaries aren't walls built to hurt others. They are structures built to protect what is still growing. Letting go can be the most honest form of care. It is care for yourself, for the part of you that has waited too long to be acknowledged. If this story teaches anything, it is this: responsibility should never cost you your sense of self. You are allowed to choose a life that makes you feel nourished instead of drained. You are allowed to step away from patterns you didn't choose. You are allowed to begin again, even if the beginning looks nothing like what others expect. I began to understand that taking care of myself was not selfish. It was necessary. The house had once been a symbol of everything I sacrificed for others. Now my small apartment, my bright little rooms, and the calm routines I had built were symbols of a life where I belonged to myself first. I learned to enjoy the quiet, to listen to myself, and to make choices that made me feel alive. Every morning, when I walked through the streets to work, I noticed things I had never allowed myself to notice before. The way sunlight hit the corners of a building, the soft sound of leaves rustling in the wind, the small smiles of strangers passing by. Life continued outside, but inside, everything was growing in ways I had never thought possible. Freedom didn't need a big announcement. It came quietly, steadily. It came in small joys and small victories, in calm mornings and soft nights. I realized that the life I had been living for others was over, and the life I was building for myself was just beginning. I knew my family's struggles were real. They were facing the consequences of a life that hadn't prepared them for independence. But I also knew I could no longer carry that weight. I had to live for myself. And in that living, I discovered a strength I never knew I had. I learned that boundaries are not cruel. They are kind. They are protection. And letting go is sometimes the kindest act of all. I had waited too long to care for myself. Now I finally could.